Hi, everybody. It's CC and JT, and today we're not wearing our amateur hour hat. We're wearing our hats from the Nevada Author Network. The Nevada Author Network is a collaboration between the Sierra Arts Foundation out of Reno, Nevada, and Two More Books LLC, our publishing company, in order to highlight and emphasize literary artists here in Northern Nevada. And we've had some wonderful times doing that. Our main platform is the Sierra Arts Literary Community. And today we are blessed and honored to have one of the leaders of that community with us, Suzanne Morgan Williams. I hope everybody's heard of Suzanne, but if not, then this is a great way to getting to know her because not only is she a prolific writer, she is a prolific teacher and community icon. And so we are just so pleased to have her back again on our little podcast here. And so Suzanne, welcome.
Thank you. I'm just really tickled to be here. That's one of my favorite words. I picked it up from my Kentucky grandmother and also from my books that I write. And I have to say, you guys do a wonderful job of helping this group. And the idea that I'm a community icon, well, maybe your lips to God's ears. We'll see.
I tell nothing but the truth. Just ask my wife.
Well, that's good. I'm glad she keeps you
Cross
in
my
mind.
heart.
So you've got so much going on. You've got so much going on. You're writing, you're teaching, you're mentoring. So instead of us trying to make sense out of it, why don't you try to make sense of it? Why don't you do the heavy lifting? Pick what you want to talk about. We'll go from there.
Okay, well, the first thing I want to talk about is community. That's really the thing that has kept me writing for more than 30 years. You can guess that from just looking at me. Maybe you can't guess that I started when I was 40 and I had 3 kids and a foreign student from Bolivia living in the house, and my mother was ill and my mother-in-law was terminally ill and I needed an escape. So I started writing. But writing is not an easy business. It's full of no's and not quites and what do you mean, why'd you contact me? And once in a while you get something really encouraging. And often that comes from your community. And that's why you guys are so important, why the Sierra Arts literary community is so important. And it's honestly why I keep writing. Then there's writing. And writing, I tell the students in my classes, if they're particularly interested in publication of longer works, that they're not going to know what they're writing about until midway through. I start out with something and I have an idea and I keep a little one-page outline. But then one morning I wake up and I think, that's what I'm writing about. And it's usually about something that I'm struggling with. And I'm like, okay, now I'll go back and make sure this text references that, reflects that. So writing personally for me is really important. It's part of my legacy. It's what I want people to take away from hours and months and literally years of work. That said, I'm going to introduce you to my new book, which is coming out February 10th. I'm going to try and get it in. There we go. This is called Seeing Daylight. And Seeing Daylight is the product, again, of many years of writing and waiting and finally deciding it had reached its time. It is the companion to my book, Bull Rider. Bull Rider is a book for readers, I would say, age 10 and up. I've had 8 and 9-year-olds read it if they're a little mature in their thinking. Bull Rider is the story. It's a novel about a 14-year-old from central Nevada, lives on a ranch, and his older brother has been in the Iraq War. When Ben, the older brother, comes home, instead of being the champion bull rider that he once was, he is severely injured and has PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and a TBI, traumatic brain injury. And actually my daughter used to work for the Department of Defense in a contract way, and she worked with families that had these issues, and sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between one and the other. That's just a little aside. Anyway, Bull Rider is the story of how Cam O'Mara helps his brother and helps his family because he wants everything back to normal. And of course it isn't, but I do write hopeful stuff because I have to live with this. And in the end, I want hope. I don't want distress. We have enough of that. So when Bull Rider came out, it did very well. It was on a lot of lists. It won some awards. I got to go all over the country speaking about it. And when I did that, I met kids. And every place I went, there was a story about my uncle, my brother, my aunt. When I was in South Texas, every person in the room knew somebody who had been in the service. And
Let me jump in here with something because I think this is an important point worth emphasizing is because the general civilian community, I'm a veteran, the general civilian community has this belief that when you're in the military, the VA, the Veterans Administration, medical administration will take care of our veterans. They will see to their every need. Now, you and I both know that, which is why these stories are so important. The VA does its best, but there's just so much that needs to be addressed.
well, thank you for that. And I will say in researching Bull Rider and then particularly in researching Seeing Daylight, which by that time I was used to the stories, I had done some initial research, and Seeing Daylight actually reflects the stories of real injured veterans who I met with. Real service dog trainers. When I wrote Bull Rider, I was a little more timid, and I interviewed people who worked with injured veterans, interviewed people who had injured veterans in their families. I used my own experience of worrying about my son-in-law at that time. But I didn't actually go meet injured veterans. I read blogs, because I was like, what am I going to say? I'm writing this book, it might not get published, and I need to know your story. And I was timid about that. But by the time I got to writing Seeing Daylight, I knew what I needed to do. And I talked to a lot of guys. I visited veteran centers in Yountville and San Diego, and I went to the Canine Companions in Santa Rosa, and I really talked to a lot of people. And this book, Seeing Daylight, my readers asked for. I sent it out. For various reasons, it didn't get picked up, mainly because we went through the economic crash of 2008, 9, and 10, and everything changed. And so Seeing Daylight has been waiting to be published. And finally, I'm like, it needs to be out there. People need to have this book. And so it's coming out February 10th. It's available through Amazon, and also you could order it through an independent bookstore. They will have to order it, but they can get it through a group called Ingram that they will know about. And I want people to read it because when you come home injured or not injured, just with the experience of being in combat, whether it be overseas or God help us in this country right now, you're changed and you need support and your family needs to understand. And sometimes I think it can feel very isolating. And to that end, you said I could direct this. I want to read you something on the back of this book. Again, I, pulled up my courage and went out and talked to a lot of people. I have been on bases talking to kids, and when I was ready to independently publish Seeing Daylight, I asked an acquaintance of mine here in Nevada who has worked with veterans. He's a silver pen winner from the University of Nevada, and he's been working tirelessly for veterans. He is himself an Iraq veteran. And this is what Caleb Cage wrote for the back of my book, and I'm pretty darn proud of it. It says, in Seeing Daylight, Suzanne Morgan Williams recreates the dissonance and brokenness that can follow veterans into the civilian world, especially for the severely wounded. She explores these difficult subjects with intense honesty and empathy, and in a way that shows the courage and relationships that it takes for many to have hope to survive. Seeing Daylight is the follow-up to Bull Rider that many of its readers have been waiting for. And I was really touched. There's another woman, Jackie Turner, who you know, who's a leader in the Sierra Arts literary community, and she is a licensed trauma therapist here in Nevada. And she said this book has everything: a small town romance, a tough but committed family, and a veteran's slow recovery from PTSD and TBI. There are also dogs, wonderful dogs, and you will love Roger, the service dog. Beautifully written and deeply moving, Seeing Daylight is a painfully realistic story of love and recovery after trauma that shows with great insight, the slow but possible healing from PTSD. What I neglected to say is this is Ben's story, where Bull Rider is from the younger brother's point of view. He's 14 and he's trying to fix things. Ben is 19 when he returns home injured, and this is from his point of view, and it's how he deals with his feelings of inadequacy and frustration and all the changes that have come to him. And he does it with the help of a service dog and a really lovely trainer of the service dog named Molly. And I really enjoyed writing this story. So there you go. I'm going to stop and let you ask me some questions. And if you want, I can read the first page or two of Seeing Daylight. Or if you don't want, we'll just visit. I'm going to over to you.
I will say that it's fascinating that you've done this because you mentioned that you've gotten Jackie, who's a therapist, and Caleb, who's a veteran. And I, dating myself here, as a child growing up during the Vietnam War era, I had two cousins go over there. One of them came back and the other didn't. And the one who came back, we did not talk about things like PTSD at that time, but he was definitely, his personality was different. He looked the same, but he was not the same person.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I didn't understand why this beloved cousin of mine was so different. He was a lot more reckless and angry, and, I'm sure it's very similar to what your character is going through in the book. So I have to say that it is very important, especially for kids, to have this kind of representation, to understand what's going on with their beloved family members. So thank you for writing that. That's actually brought up some memories that they can be very difficult to handle, but reading books like this is very important. So especially the fact that you're also doing school visits, I think that's a wonderful way to have outreach and to help kids learn more about the kind of scary things that they're dealing with, especially with beloved adults. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, because it's definitely something that I will be reading. And like I said, I'm already getting a little bit emotional about it.
Well, and I also want to say that whereas Bull Rider is straddles between middle grade and YA fiction, this one is definitely YA because of the subject matter, and it's about mental health issues.
Right.
And I would like to see the readers of Seeing Daylight be 13 or 14 and up. Mm-hmm. And I do think it's something that will hold adults' attention. Maybe I already said this, but I often say I don't write anything that I don't want to read, because as writers that we're going to read it 100 times.
Nice.
And there's no way it's going to hold my attention if I'm not interested in it.
And that's the challenge. And our podcast mission, actually for our other podcast, but it counts here, is to help writers write. We in the literary community, want to lift each other up for the writing experience. So what would you say, I'm going to ask you to give me a range here from writing these books. What was the easiest part to write, and what was the hardest part to write?
Well, the easiest part of Seeing Daylight was knowing the characters already. That when you spend a lot of time with characters, you get this it is kind of a mental issue. I believe that these people live. When I'm out toward Winnemucca, I can imagine Cam and Ben out riding their horses or shooting a coyote or whatever. And so to take those characters and reintroduce them in Seeing Daylight was really quite easy. I knew what to expect. In Bull Rider had a really interesting beginning in that I had met an editor through another writers group, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and I was a leader in that group. And we were hosting an editor who, through many turns of events, asked me to write her a book about cowboys. And I said, well, I'm not sure. I said, we could do rodeo. She said, what kind of rodeo? I said, well, bull riders are crazy. And she said, oh yeah, I want a young middle grade book about bull riders. And I'm thinking, this kid is going to be 8 years old. I don't know, I don't know how we're going to do that. And again, through 3 or 4 iterations, her job changed and that offer went away. And then there was another editor interested, and he did some real interesting comments, and I wrote the book according to that. And then he disappeared, and I had a third editor. It was really funny. The second editor asked me to really hone down the book and make it much shorter. So I had done that, and then when I sent it to yet the third editor, who eventually bought it, first thing she said to me is, "Could it be a little longer?"
Right.
And luckily, like many authors, I save my different versions, and so I had some writing that I could just slip back in. But all that said, the hardest thing about Bull Rider was sort of finding the topic, because I went through these 3 or 4 people who wanted different things. And once it became the story of the 2 brothers, then the hardest thing was I had not intended to write that book about war injury. I had started out with the idea that it was a kid who wanted to be a bull rider and his parents didn't want him to do it. And it was during the Iraq War. I had a son-in-law in the service. He was actually never deployed to Iraq, but that was always a possibility. My husband and I were on vacation, and I was sitting on this deck in New Mexico thinking about who the family would be for Bull Rider. And and his older brother was gonna be in the service because they were from a small town, and that's often the only opportunity. Then it hit me, if he's in the service, this is not going to be honest if he's not in the war or worried about going to it. And it developed from there that I did not want to write about war injury. I am a wuss. My kids have to watch movies before, well, they're grown-ups now, but they used to have to watch movies before I saw them and tell me if they were too violent for me. So that was the challenge with that. And ultimately, I decided that, to be honest, we needed to talk about that. And I will promise any parent or teacher who's interested in Bull Rider that it's accessible. It's not gory. It's, I think, honest without being graphic, because that's how I am. So that was the hardest thing with Bull Rider. And with Seeing Daylight, the hardest thing, that's interesting. I guess it was sort of balancing the action of getting a service dog and learning to walk and talk again, and being with this girl that Ben wasn't sure that he was up to it. All that sort of active stuff, the real plot of the book, which gets very tense toward the end, with the mental things that he was going through, which had to be on the page because it's from his point of view. But you guys read it, you can let me know if I managed that or not.
That's good.
Well, based on, you've talked about the character development and everything, but the setting is also a very important part of the story. And how do you balance getting the right amount of character development with the setting and all of the extraneous things that go on in the story as well?
Yeah, the technical stuff that sometimes non-writers don't seem to understand, because the setting is a character.
Well, and I love that. And often when I start a book, I start with the setting. That wasn't true with Seeing Daylight because, as I said, I already had a lot of the people and background in my mind. It definitely was with Bull Rider and with other manuscripts that I've written. This is another book that we've talked about before, Sierra Blue. That one definitely started with the setting. I wanted to write a book set in the mountains, and I wanted it to be partly in California because that's a big market. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people who in that state who aren't interested unless they see their own state. And as you know, we can go 20 miles up the mountain here and we'll be in California anyway. And that's where I was raised. So all that said, I have been obsessed with plants and flora and fauna for years. My husband and I moved around a lot as he was transferred in his job. And the first thing I would do is go to the local nursery and find out what could grow. And then we would go hiking. And years ago, when I was teaching elementary school, I am a former teacher, I was an outdoor education instructor in the Sierra. And I would teach kids the difference between a ponderosa pine and a sugar pine and a white pine. And, we could go through it, and I could bore all of your listeners to death about all the things in the high Sierra and the foothills. But I love that stuff. And then as a writer, you learn to talk about the smells and the textures and to use the weather as a backdrop. I mean, you can see that in any movie. Good night. If there's going to be something terrible coming, here comes the thunder and the rain, and you have to try not to make it too cheesy, but it helps. And I also am a real believer that where you live, particularly where you are raised, and the way that you experience the world physically in that place shapes your character. I mean, if you grow up on a cattle ranch in central Nevada and it takes you 40 minutes to get to your next neighbor, you are going to be a different kind of person than if you grow up in a suburb of Los Angeles where you take your skateboard out and go down the cul-de-sac every morning. I mean, it's just different. So I have a text that probably won't ever be published, but I loved writing it, set in the Arctic. And I'll tell you, you grow up in the Arctic, you have a whole different experience than you and I have ever imagined. And I got a glimpse into it when I started researching up there. But that's another story.
Okay, and so you mentioned teaching. We're going to segue to teaching first. But let's take advantage of your kind offer to read some of your book.
Okay. Time to break it up. This is the first page of Seeing Daylight, and there's the cover again. Part of me disappeared at that crossroads outside of Baghdad. Yeah, I can still smell the IED exploding and see the fear in that Iraqi kid's eyes as he dragged me out of the street to safety. I play the scene over and over in my head in a bright, slow-motion flashback. But then the field doc shot me up with drugs that dropped me into a medical coma. Time dissolved. And after they amputated my lower arm and repaired my head and the traumatic brain injury started to heal, I had to learn to talk again, to walk, all that. I still can't remember most of what happened. That's why my family wants me to go to therapy. Grandpa Roy drives me to Winnemucca for my appointment. I wonder what this therapist is going to ask me. Sure, I can picture the guys in my unit. I still know how to take care of my uniform and clean my rifle, and I know I was a Marine, even if I couldn't string 2 words together without fighting my own tongue after they brought me out of that coma last year. But the details about the day when everything changed, I don't have one clue, and I think I like it that way. So that's the first page, and then it goes on to his therapist appointment.
Okay, and this is such an important message that really needs to be spread far and wide. So let's talk about the teaching. Now, this is going to be posted to the internet on Tuesday morning, February 3rd. But you've got something important going on February 3rd, teaching.
Yeah, I'm excited. I live south of Reno, and on February 3rd, I start teaching a class at the Carson City Senior Center. It is free. You can sign up by contacting the Senior Center. It's every Tuesday from 2 to 4 p.m. We'll probably finish at 3:30, honestly. That's the reservation for the room. And we are going to be talking about connecting with your memories and using them to inspire writing, just as you guys were talking about. I am excited to do it. It's 6 weeks, which means we have plenty of time to do some exercises, have some instruction, and also time to write and share. And that's what we're doing. I don't believe that you have to live in Carson City. I'm pretty sure of that. I'm not sure if you have to consider yourself senior. I'm not going to ask for your birth certificate. So if you're interested, contact the Carson City Senior Center, and we'll have a good time.
Yes, these classes are so helpful because we did the class on setting with you, I believe, a while back. Mark Twain days. I think both JT and I could say that we found it very valuable for us.
Oh,
so
thank you.
I highly recommend that anybody who's in the local area around Carson City check this out because it is a good way to not only inspire your writing, but maybe give you a little bit more self-confidence because you may remember things that you had forgotten for years and some kind of really interesting story could come out of it. So definitely check it out.
Well, and I want to add, too, that this is coming out the morning of that first class. If for some reason you have plans to do something else on Tuesday, February 3rd in the afternoon, I'm pretty sure you would be able to sign up for the next class. That kind of depends on how many people actually come to the first one, but I think there'll be room probably. So it'd be fun to see you there. And I will say that I had special training for working with older adults, which I found kind of funny given the way that I'm definitely an older adult. But I learned a lot. And one of the things that I learned is if we're going to take time at this stage in our lives to do something, it darn well better be fun. So we're going to try and have some fun because it's not, I am a very serious writer. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I can get kind of focused on the nitty gritty and details of the craft. But for these classes, we're going to make sure that that is part, and having fun is part, and sharing with the people there is part, and definitely that you get time to write if you get inspired.
Okay, and that's all excellent. And it's so exciting to hear about this plan. So we talked about Suzanne Morgan Williams today with Seeing Daylight. We talked about her teaching this class in the near future. So what does your future look like in the literary world, or however you wish to choose?
That's a good question. I will say that during COVID, I got really used to being isolated, and that's one of the reasons that these senior classes are so important. Now, I am still trying to get used to getting back into this sort of energy of my former life. And part of that has to do with writing. And I see with Seeing Daylight that I need to do some promotion. I need to meet readers. I need to make sure that having read the book or written the book, that somebody reads it. Again, I tell kids when I go to schools, I say, I do not want you to buy this because you want an orange cover on your bookshelf. None of us write a book to sit in the library for you to just go, they're written for what's inside. So I need readers, and I need to be concentrating on that. I have been having trouble starting a new project. And part of the reason I'm teaching this particular class is because this is the inspiration I need. So you're going to have to tune back in and find out what my next project is. I do have a book on submission right now, which is nonfiction historical, set in part in Nevada. It's about Western expansion. I'm excited about that, but that one's out. So I just have to wait, and we'll see. You have to wait too.
Nope, that's fantastic. So as we wind up on this, Suzanne, tell us where we can find you on the internet.
Thank you.
Very excellent website.
I apologize for the length of this, but there's another Suzanne Williams who writes for children. I write, I think, for ages 10 and up. I have a lot of adult readers. But my website is Suzanne Morgan Williams, just as you see on this screen, and you will get to my website. I do not sell books off of my website. You need to buy my books from Amazon or from your local bookstore. Hopefully you will find some in your library, but that depends. Bull Rider used to definitely be there. And I'm on Facebook, Suzanne Morgan Williams. You'll learn a lot more about me there because that's kind of a personal and professional site. I'm on Instagram, Susie M. Williams. I almost never go there. So I might start, but those are the places to find me.
Okay, that sounds awesome. So before we let you go, any last thoughts about this entire experience that you're going through? Again, being this fantastic and prolific writer and energetic teacher and mentor. Any last thoughts for us?
Yes, you're the only person who can tell the stories that you have, be they nonfiction, memoir, fiction. All fiction comes from us. It's not autobiographical, but it is. If it's out of your brain, it's coming from you. You're the only person who can do it. Don't worry about that somebody else is going to copy you or whatever. Your story is your story. And right now, art is so incredibly important, not just to older people as we think about what we will leave for our children or our grandchildren or the young people that we know, but for our society. Art generally has some poetic license. I've done a lot of nonfiction for kids, and in the old conquest days of South America, it was often through dance that Native people kept their cultures alive, and irony. And we have the opportunity with the written word, with visual art, to keep alive those things that are most important to us. And I would so encourage every person listening to this to do that, whether it's through dance or visual arts or music or writing. We need art right now. And I'm going to take that and write it down, put it over my desk, and maybe I'll get started on that next project.
Excellent.
So true.
Well said. Well said. Bravo. So thank you, Suzanne. Thank you to Suzanne Morgan Williams for joining us here with these important words and everything that's going on with her professionally. Wow, so much going on. Here on the Nevada Author Network, which is a collaboration between Two More Books, LLC, our publishing company, and the Sierra Arts Foundation out of Reno, Nevada. Together, we like to highlight and emphasize the great work done by literary artists here in Northern Nevada, which the three of us are humbly, very happy and humble to be members of. So for now, thank you again, Suzanne.
No, thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.